Hey everyone, it's Jenny at JC Cards, and I've got a new card series starting today. It's called Male Male, and it's a masculine card series. I'm going to be showing you, over the next few weeks, different types of masculine cards. Today I'm focusing on cards for gamers. Now, they could be for the guys, but there are girl gamers as well, so there could be someone you think may want one of these. They're clean and simple, and they pretty much will use stuff that you've likely got in your stash. So first off, I'm starting out with an A2 size panel of Midnight Black cardstock, and I have 3 different colours of cardstock. They're all by Simon Says Stamp. You can see all the supplies I've used down in the description box below. So first off, I'm using a circle die. This is a Spellbinders classic circle, but you can use any circle die you've got in your stash. And I'm die cutting a small circle from yellow cardstock. And I'm then going to use my scissors and I'm going to make a couple of small snips, and I think you can probably see where this first card is going. I'm going for a very particular shape here. Very recognisable shape. And this one is a retro gaming card. Probably mostly recognisable by people over the age of 40, but it is a pretty recognisable character. I'm then taking the scraps of red and blue cardstock. And I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, but even I can draw these. I'm using a micron black marker just to draw a smooth curve and then some wiggly lines, and then I'm going to fussy cut them out as well. Obviously, you don't have to use red and blue, you can use any colour you want. I was just using scraps of cardstock that I had in my stash. You might also have a stamp set. I'm not sure off the top of my head if there are any stamp sets that look similar to this, but I didn't have any and I wanted to improvise. I'm just going around the edge of the shape with a Memento Tuxedo black marker, and this just helps tidy up any cutting that I kind of may have messed up a little bit on. I did notice that one of the little ghost's legs was slightly wonky, so I just did a little bit of quick cutting and went back over it with the Memento marker again just to tidy it up. Now for the eyes, I'm using White Blizzard Nuvo drops, and I'm going to hold up my bottle straight up in the air, drop out an eyeball size amount of white, and I'm going to do that on both. And then what I'm going to do is, before it dries, I'm going to use black. I've got Ranger Enamel Accents and it's got a very clogged bottle, but you can also use, I think there's Nuvo Ebony Black Nuvo drops as well, and you're going to add a tiny dot into the centre. Now, because my bottle was clogged, one of the blue ghost's eyes went a bit crazy, so I did do another guy, but look at that, isn't it cool? These take quite a while to dry, so I actually left them overnight to dry, and you'll see what else I'm using Nuvo drops for shortly. But I did, just so you know, I did leave all the Nuvo drops to dry overnight to avoid putting my hand in them, as I typically tend to do otherwise. So I'm adhering a A2 size panel of Midnight Black cardstock onto a Nina Solar White 110 card base. And I'm popping up the yellow shape on foam squares just off to the left hand side. I'm then going to add my sentiment. I'm using the Simple Sentiments 2 by CZ's Design and Simon Says Stamp, and I love this Happy Birthday to You with the number 2 and the letter U. I thought that went, it kind of reminded me of a retro game, that kind of text. I'm not sure why. I thought it went really well. You can obviously use any sentiment you want. You could even use alpha stamps and create your own sentiment, but I didn't have any small enough and I wanted to keep these cards pretty clean and simple. And I've treated my cardstock with a powder bag. I'm stamping the sentiment in Versamark embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss it in Wow Embossing opaque bright white embossing powder. Now I'm using a pencil and a tea ruler. I'm lightly drawing a line to guide where I'm going to add Nuvo drops, because I'm doing a couple of turns on this card, and this is going to form the pathway for the little bites that the guy is going after. And I'm doing a couple of twists and turns. I'm using my tea ruler just to keep everything straight, and I will go back and erase the pencil lines afterwards. I'm now using the Nuvo drops in White Blizzard again, and I'm, as well as I can, evenly spacing out the Nuvo drops along the pencil line. I feel like I've sped this up, so I wish I could do it this quickly. I can almost hear the sound effects from the game as I'm doing this. And you do have to have quite a steady hand, but if you go wrong you can actually, while it's still wet, just wipe it away with your finger and leave it to dry and use a knife, you can scratch it off. I'm now using a green Sakura jelly roll to add a couple of cherry stalks and then the autumn red Nuvo drops as the cherries. And then I'm going to set this aside to dry overnight. It probably will dry quicker than that, but as this was reasonably late in the day anyway, I wanted to make sure it was absolutely dry before I finished it off. And here's my little guy. I love those eyes, so cute. And I'm just going to pop him and the other guy up on foam squares. I do add the entire circular foam here, but actually when you add that on top of the Nuvo drops, it's slightly wonky, so off camera I did go back in and cut the circle in half and then re-added them back on. Quite frankly, I don't know how he's going to get at the cherry on this card. It looks like impossible odds, but you know, you never know. And that finishes the first card. You could totally adapt this for any sort of platform type game or maze type game. If you've got better artistic skills than I do. That was the best I could draw, but I am really pleased with how this turned out. So for my next card, we're going to be even more clean and simple, and I don't require any ability to draw on this one whatsoever. So we're going to be doing some ink blending, which is definitely in my wheelhouse. I have a small scrap of cold press watercolor cardstock here. This is, it doesn't matter how high it is, but it is 4.5 inches wide because we're going to use it to create a strip that goes widthways across a card. And I'm blending 5 colours of ink across the piece of cardstock, going from red to blue. So I'm starting off with Catherine Pooler in Tutti Frutti, and then going to Tiara, Grass Skirt, Something Borrowed, and Juniper Mist. And I'm not being particularly careful because we're only going to be cutting a thin strip, so where there's blending marks it doesn't matter too much because we're going to be trimming most of it off. And I'm using my makeup brushes to do the blending that you've seen me use a couple of times, but I really wasn't that careful on here. And I'm then going to put the piece into my paper trimmer and trim off a strip probably about 3/4 of an inch wide, and it's going to be just a little bit longer than an A2 size width card panel, so it's about 4.5 inches in length. And then we're going to trim a couple more pieces. So I'm using some silver cardstock. This is mirror cardstock. This one's by Die Cuts with a View, but you can get very similar cardstock from Tonic Studios, from Altenew, from Spellbinders. I've linked to a couple of them down in the supply list. And that's also 4.5 inches wide and about 2 inches high. I'm now going to stamp the sentiment. This is from the Simple Sentiments by CZ Design and Simon Says Stamp. I've treated the strip with a powder bag, and I'm stamping it with Versamark ink again and embossing it in white embossing powder. This one says, "Love your guts." It's quite a masculine sentiment, but it's probably one of my favourite ones. Now I have an A2 size panel of Midnight Black cardstock again, and I'm scoring 7 or 8 lines. I've started about 1/3 of the way in, and every 1/4 of an inch I'm adding a score line, about 7 or 8 score lines. I'm going to show you what this is based on shortly, but you can see the pattern that creates. Then going to adhere down my silver cardstock, which I've trimmed to 4.25 inches off camera, and I've also added an inch high, 4.25 inch long strip of wood grain paper. So I think it's actually real wood, this paper, and you can get it from Ellen Hutson. I think Altenew also has it. And then with a foam tape strip, I'm adding the blended sentiment and just trimming off any excess. I'm then going to mount it onto a card base made from Nina Solar White 110 pound cardstock and trim off the excess, and that finishes the card. This is actually based on the Atari console, the Atari 2600, and I added the wood strip as well because there is another console that has a wood grain strip at the front. So again, pretty retro for anyone in your life that used to love retro gaming. Very cool. My final card, I'm using Nestabilities dies from Spellbinders and the X from the Bold Alphabet die set by Altenew. I've got an A2 size panel of Smoke and Mirrors cardstock by Catherine Pooler, and I've die cut a circle, a square, a triangle, which is actually created from a diamond Nestabilities, and I've cut it in half, from white cardstock, and I'm mounting all of the shapes onto these just above the center of the panel on foam squares. And I wasn't sure there which size circle to go for. I cut a couple of options, and again, it really does help if you've got a nesting circle die set so that you can play around a little bit. You can use any X alpha in your stash, or even you could use strips of tape to create the X. And I'm using the Tiny Words stamp set by Simon Says Stamp, and I'm using the sentiment "You Are My Hero." These shapes are based on the PlayStation logo, and I thought "You Are My Hero," you know, if you've got a gamer in your life that likes to be the hero in computer games, I thought that sentiment went really well. And I've cut a sentiment strip using the Simon Says Stamp sentiments strip labels dies, and I'm stamping the sentiment in Versamark ink and heat embossing in white embossing powder again. I'm then going to adhere down the strip with dry adhesive directly across underneath the shapes and trim off the excess, and that completes the card. Another idea for this is, I noticed in the logo the X and O, you could make this a love card and you could colour in the X and the O just to make them a bit more emphasised. That could be a good idea, and that completes the trio of cards. So I hope you've enjoyed this first instalment of the Mail Mail series. Please, if you did enjoy it, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to be notified when I have a new video. Here's a couple more videos you might enjoy. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day. Bye.